It was a crisp autumn evening when James noticed the first crack in his seemingly perfect marriage. His wife, Emily, had been acting differently lately, distracted, distant, and always on her phone. At first, James brushed it off as stress from her demanding job, but the changes became harder to ignore. Emily started working late more often, citing deadlines and meetings that James couldn't verify. When he asked about her day, her answers were vague, lacking the usual warmth and detail he loved about her. He tried to be supportive, convincing himself that it was just a phase. After all, they had been married for 10 years, and their relationship had always been built on trust. One evening, as James sat alone in their living room waiting for Emily to return, he noticed her laptop left open on the dining table. It wasn't like him to snoop, but curiosity got the better of him. As he scrolled through her emails, his heart sank. There were messages from a man named Ryan, filled with inside jokes, late-night plans, and an intimacy that James hadn't seen in their own conversations for months. James felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and an aching sadness. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, so he decided to confront Emily directly. That night, when she finally came home, he asked her about Ryan. She froze, her face a mixture of guilt and fear, confirming what James already knew deep down. Emily confessed to having an affair. She told James that it started as a friendship, but quickly became something more. She didn't blame him, but admitted she had felt unfulfilled in their marriage for a while. James listened, his chest tightening with every word. He had been blindsided, believing they were happy, while Emily had been drifting away. The days that followed were filled with long, painful conversations. Emily expressed regret and said she wanted to work on their marriage. But James wasn't sure if he could forgive her. The trust they had built over the years was shattered, and he didn't know if it could ever be repaired. James took time for himself, seeking advice from friends and even attending therapy sessions to process his feelings. He realized that while he still loved Emily, rebuilding their relationship would take time, effort, and a willingness to heal on both sides. Months later, James and Emily were still working through their issues. It wasn't easy, but they decided to try. Whether their marriage would survive the betrayal was uncertain. But James knew one thing for sure: love, no matter how deep, can be fragile, and it requires constant care to thrive. As the months stretched on, James found himself caught in an emotional limbo. Some days were filled with glimmers of hope, small moments where Emily's sincerity and remorse felt genuine. Other days, the weight of her betrayal crushed him, and he questioned whether trying to salvage their marriage was worth the pain. Emily, for her part, made every effort to prove her commitment to rebuilding what they had lost. She quit her job, severing all ties with Ryan, and willingly attended couples therapy sessions with James. She laid her phone open for him, answered his questions no matter how uncomfortable, and even wrote a letter explaining everything, a raw, unfiltered account of her actions and her regrets. Despite her efforts, James struggled to let go of the images and doubts that plagued his mind. Every time she stepped out of the house, he couldn't help but wonder if she might be hiding something again. His trust had been broken, and rebuilding it felt like trying to climb a mountain without knowing if the summit was even reachable. Their therapist often reminded them that healing wasn't linear. Some days would feel like progress, while others would feel like setbacks. She encouraged James to express his feelings without fear of judgment, and pushed Emily to confront the underlying reasons for her choices. Through these sessions, James learned to communicate his pain more constructively, while Emily began to understand the depth of the wounds she had caused. But healing wasn't just about therapy. It was in the small, everyday choices they made. Emily would leave handwritten notes for James in the morning, promising her love and devotion. James would try to meet her efforts halfway, finding moments to remind her of the bond they once shared. They started going on dates again, revisiting places that held cherished memories, as if trying to recapture pieces of their past. Still, the question of whether they could ever truly move forward loomed large. James knew forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. The affair had left a scar on their marriage, one that might never fully fade. But he also realized that holding on to resentment would only poison what remained of their love. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily reached for James' hand. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. "But I promise, for as long as you'll let me, I'll do everything I can to make things right." James looked at her, the woman he had once believed would never hurt him, and saw both the love and the mistakes they had shared. He didn't know if he could ever fully let go of the pain, but in that moment, he decided to try, not for her, but for himself. Because sometimes love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to stay, even when it's hard, and believing that broken things can still be mended. Over the following months, James and Emily's journey toward healing continued to be a delicate balance of hope and struggle. Their progress was slow, but not without its victories. Each small gesture, a lingering hug, a shared laugh, or a heartfelt apology, became a building block in the fragile structure of their renewed bond. James still faced moments of doubt. Sometimes, late at night, when Emily was asleep beside him, he would stare at the ceiling, his mind racing with memories of the betrayal. But he also reminded himself of her efforts, the ways she was trying to prove her sincerity. Emily, too, was navigating her own labyrinth of guilt and self-reflection. She carried the weight of knowing she had deeply hurt the person she loved most. One evening, during dinner, Emily surprised James with an old photo album she had found in the attic. As they flipped through pictures of their early days, grinning faces from road trips, lazy Sundays captured in candid shots, both felt a bittersweet ache. "I want us to find our way back to that," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Even if it takes the rest of my life, I'll keep trying." James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "It's not about going back," he replied. "It's about building something new, something stronger." Inspired by that conversation, they decided to start fresh in their own way. They began taking small trips together, exploring places neither of them had visited before. These experiences allowed them to create new memories, untainted by the past. They also made a point to share more dreams, fears, even the mundane details of their day. Slowly, they began to feel like partners again. Yet, healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, arguments triggered by lingering insecurities or moments when James felt the weight of mistrust creep back in. But instead of retreating into silence or defensiveness, they learned to confront these feelings together. Emily would listen patiently, acknowledging James' pain while he worked on expressing his emotions without letting anger consume him. Their therapist often reminded them that rebuilding a relationship wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to coexist with it. "The scars will always be there," she said during one session. "But scars are a sign that healing has taken place." As time went on, those scars became less tender. The pain of betrayal never fully disappeared, but it transformed into something else, a quiet resilience, a reminder of how far they had come. They were no longer the same couple they had been before the affair. In many ways, they were stronger, forged by the trials they had endured. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch once again, watching the stars blink into existence, James reached for Emily's hand. "We're not perfect," he said softly, "but I think we're better than we were before. And I'm willing to keep trying if you are." Emily squeezed his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm with you. Always." For the first time in what felt like forever, James felt a sense of peace. They weren't fully healed, but they were on their way. Together, the seasons changed, and with them, so did James and Emily's life. Their commitment to each other had shifted from an abstract promise to something tangible, built on actions rather than words. Each day brought new opportunities to prove their love. Though the process was far from easy, Emily continued to show her dedication in countless small ways. She made a habit of leaving James thoughtful notes before she left for errands, sometimes tucked into his coat pocket or placed on the bathroom mirror. These notes reminded him of her love and her resolve to make amends. James, in turn, began to find moments where he could let go of the lingering bitterness. Forgiveness wasn't something that came all at once. It was a choice he had to make over and over. There were days when doubts gnawed at him, but he had started to trust that Emily's remorse was genuine. They also made an effort to surround themselves with supportive people. Friends who had known them for years helped them reconnect with the joy and laughter they'd once shared. During weekend get-togethers, James found himself smiling at Emily's jokes, feeling a spark of the warmth that had drawn him to her in the first place. Their relationship wasn't without its challenges. Every so often, the shadows of the past would surface. An unexpected reminder of Ryan or an offhand comment could stir up old wounds. But they had learned how to handle these moments without letting them spiral. Instead of retreating into silence, they faced their pain together. One pivotal moment came during a weekend getaway to a quiet cabin in the mountains. Sitting by the fireplace one evening, Emily asked James to tell her honestly what he needed from her moving forward. "I need to know that I'm enough," James admitted, his voice low. "I need to feel like you see me, like I matter to you in ways no one else ever could." Emily nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "You do matter. More than anything. I'm sorry I made you doubt that. I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that you're enough." That conversation became a turning point for them. They began focusing more on the things they loved about each other, their shared interests, their mutual goals, the quirks that made them laugh. They started making plans for the future, no longer dwelling solely on the pain of the past. Years later, as they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary, James reflected on how far they had come. Their relationship was far from perfect, but it was real, built on hard-won trust and the understanding that love is as much about perseverance as it is about passion. In the end, James realized that their marriage wasn't defined by the mistakes they had made, but by how they had chosen to rebuild after those mistakes. And as he looked across the table at Emily, her eyes filled with gratitude and love, he knew that choosing to stay had been the right decision. They had become stronger, not in spite of the pain, but because of it.